Hey guys, today we are going to talk about the rise of Rome. So, we're going to look at some of the things that are going to cause it to grow into such a great empire. There's quite a bit that's going to go on. These are pretty important notes, so make sure we're doing a good job and paying attention on this one. Okay, so, excuse me, the land and peoples of Italy. So, Indo Europeans moved into Italy from about 1500 to 1000 BC. So these are people moving down from Europe into the peninsula of Italy. Okay, one of these groups is known as the Latins, and they are going to be from the region of Latium. After 800 BC, the Greeks and the Etruscans are going to move into Italy as well. So we're going to have three groups. Okay, so the Latins, the Greeks, and the Etruscans. And so the Greeks are going to settle in southern Italy. So we kind of looked in the last unit at some of the Greek colonies. So they're going to basically, if you look at Italy as if it's a boot, okay, they're kind of going to be in the toe and the heel of that boot. So this is going to give the Romans their alphabet and the models for sculpture, architecture, and literature. Now, the Etruscans are going to have a much larger impact on Rome's development. So after about 650 BC, they're going to control most of what is Rome and then Latium as well. And they're going to turn Rome from a village into a city. And they're going to give the Romans their mode of dress, so the toga and the short cloak. And they're also going to give them their organization of the army, is going to be modeled after the Etruscans as well. Okay? So early Rome was ruled by kings. Some were Etruscans, but in 509 BC, the Romans overthrew the last Etruscan king and created a republic. So this is going to be important. So before Rome becomes an empire, it is a republic. Okay, so in a republic, the leader is not a king, and certain citizens have the right to vote. So we actually have a republic. We live in what's called a federal republic. It's not exactly the same as what Rome was doing, but we elect people to make decisions for us. Okay, so we vote for the people. All right. By 264 BC, Rome had defeated the other states of Latium, the people of the central Apennines, the Greeks in the south, and the last Etruscan settlements in the north. And so Rome now controls almost all of Italy. So you can see here, okay, so there's Rome. Okay, these were the Greeks here, and then they controlled the there's the Etruscans there, the italics, this is the Italians, okay? So all of this here, virtually all of this, becomes part of Rome, okay, under the control of Rome. So to rule, the Romans created what was called the Roman Confederation. So some people, especially the Latins, had full Roman citizenship. But other groups were considered allies, and they controlled local affairs and gave soldiers to Rome, but they could not become citizens. Okay? So the Romans believed that their success was due to three virtues: duty, courage, and discipline. And they were very good diplomats. This is really what's going to set them apart. And they were very shrewd in extending Roman citizenship and allowing states to run their internal affairs. Okay, so as they took people over, they were much more likely to give certain people, mostly the powerful in those areas, citizenship, so that they would just become under Roman control. They were also very skilled, persistent soldiers and very good strategists. They were brilliant strategists. And for example, they built towns throughout conquered Italy, and then they connected them with roads, and this allowed soldiers to be deployed quickly if there's ever an issue in an area. Okay, so they were very, very good and very, very efficient, especially early on. So the Romans distrusted kingship because of their experience with the Etruscan kings. And so early Rome is going to be divided into two social groups. Okay, so you have the patricians, which are your large landowners, and they formed the ruling class. So this is what these guys would have looked like. Okay, this would be a patrician man and woman. And then the plebeians are these guys right here. These are your smaller landowning farmers, craftspeople, and merchants. Okay, but members of both of these groups were considered citizens and they could vote, but only patricians were allowed to actually be elected. Okay, so that's why we got this picture here. So these guys are the only ones allowed to be elected, the patricians, but these guys can vote on them. Okay? So the chief executive officers of the Roman Republic were the consuls and the praetors. So there's two consuls, and they led the army into battle. Okay, and then the praetor directed the civil law. So that's like the every day-to-day rulings of the the territory. So this is law that applies to citizens in particular, not necessarily the military. So later, there's going to be another praetor that's going to be added to handle the law as it applied to non-citizens. Okay, so there's different parts, different aspects basically of their society that gets broken up into who's in control of it. And then the Roman Senate was especially important. So they had about 300 patricians and they served for life. So, like in our Senate, they serve for 6 years and they have to be reelected. In this, they serve for life and these guys made up the original Senate. By the 3rd century, it actually had the force of law. So it was actually the Senate was actually the one basically ruling and enforcing the law. The most important people's assembly, though, was the Centuriate Assembly. And they elected the consuls and the praetors and passed the laws. And they were organized by class based on wealth. Okay, so the wealthiest citizens were always the majority. And so the wealthiest citizens were making the laws and getting the consuls and praetors to enforce them. Okay, so there's obviously going to be conflict because the plebeians, they wanted political and social equality because they were still serving in the army. They were expected to protect Rome, but they were able to vote, but they weren't allowed to serve in the government. So they wanted a little more representation. So 471 BC, the Council of the Plebs was created, and the officials of that are called the tribunes of the plebs. And these are basically to protect the plebeians. And by the 4th century BC, the plebeians were allowed to be consuls. And by 287 BC, the council of the plebs actually got the right to pass laws for all of Rome. And so even though they are doing all these things, the wealthy class with the Senate is still ruling political life. So one of Rome's most important contributions is its system of law. The first code of law is known as the 12 Tables. This is very, very important. This was adopted in 450 BC. But as Rome expanded, the legal questions arose that involved Romans and non-Romans. So they're going to adopt a new body of law known as the Law of Nations. And this is going to basically be able to handle some of these more intricate cases where it's not very clearly black and white. So the Romans identified it as natural or universal law, this Law of Nations. And the standards of justice had to apply to all people equally, which is something that we still use today. So the ideas like you're innocent until proven guilty, that comes from the Law of Nations. The accused has a right to a defense before a judge. Judges should decide cases based on evidence. Okay, all of these comes from the first code of law. So Rome faced a strong power in the Mediterranean known as Carthage. So Carthage is located right here. This is in present-day Tunisia, okay, in North Africa. And it had a very large trading empire with the Western Mediterranean. So we're talking this purple here is where they controlled, but if we were to zoom this map out, we would see like they traded with like the Spanish and more like the Moroccans and other places over there to the west. But the two groups began a long struggle in 264 BC for control of the Mediterranean. So they're going to fight a series of wars known as the Punic Wars. So the first Punic War began when Rome sent troops into Sicily. As you can see here, Carthage controlled Sicily. Okay, so this right here is the island of Sicily. And the Romans realized that to win this war, they needed a large navy. So they really built up their navy, and then they defeated Carthage's navy. So 241 BC, Carthage gave its rights up to Sicily and then paid tribute to Rome. And so at this point, Sicily becomes a province of Rome. Okay, so that's the first Punic War. Carthage did not like this. They wanted revenge. So Hannibal, this is him right here. Hannibal was the Carthaginian general, and he is going to begin the second Punic War. So Hannibal is going to go through Spain, and he's going to move up through the what are those? The Apennines? No. I'm blanking on the name of those mountains there. Between France and Spain. He's going to go through those mountains, and then he's going to go over in through the Alps, and then down into where Italy is today. So he's going to enter Spain, move east, and then cross the Alps. Like I said, the Pyrenees. That's what it is between Spain and France. So that's where he's going to go through, and then he's going to go through the Alps. And then he's going to include a large number of horses, 37 battle elephants. This will be the first time most of these Romans had ever seen an elephant, and it's obviously huge, okay, covered in armor and pretty intimidating. That's about it, though. They're not really that great at battle because they're pretty slow, but they are intimidating. But many soldiers and animals will die during the crossing, especially through the Alps because it was winter and it's cold in those mountains. But Rome was still under real threat. The Battle of Cana, Rome lost almost 40,000 men, but they have expanded so much that they are able to raise another army. So this right here shows you here, Pyrenees. I should have thought of that. All right, so this red route here, this is Hannibal's route. So he comes up through Spain, okay, through the Pyrenees mountains, through the Alps. That's where that picture on the last slide was from. It was a depiction from it. Obviously, it wasn't actually taken there. And then he's going to move in through the Apennine Mountains, through into Italy, and then he's going to head back this way. We'll talk about this in a minute. So Hannibal's basically roaming throughout Italy. You kind of see he's kind of doing like a little loop-de-loop here, and he's just kind of hanging out and going all throughout Italy. But he could not successfully attack the major cities. But in a brilliant move, Rome is going to attack Carthage. So they're just going to put all their eggs in one basket, and they're just going to go and attack Carthage. And so that's going to force Hannibal back home. Okay, so this is going to lead to what's called the Battle of Zama. And so basically, while Hannibal is hanging out in Italy, the Romans go to Carthage, destroy the city, Battle of Zama. So Hannibal has to come back, and Hannibal's forces are destroyed. Okay, so Spain now is going to become a province of Rome, and then Rome is going to control the Western Mediterranean. Okay, so that leads us to the Third Punic War. So in 146 BC, soldiers once again are going to sack Carthage. So 50,000 men, women, and children after this were sold into slavery. And Carthage became known as a Roman province that's going to be known as Africa, which is what obviously the continent is named after. It's named after a Roman general, Africanus. But anyway, so Rome was conquered, Macedonia and Greece. And so now Rome not only has the Western Mediterranean, now they're controlling most of the Eastern Mediterranean. So they pretty much control the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so this video is about Hannibal, the Punic Wars, the causes and summaries, and then just answer the questions in the right-hand column as you go. Make sure this is turned up.
By the mid-3rd century BCE, the Romans reigned supreme in Italy. They'd squashed the Sabines, vanquished the Volsci, trounced the Etruscans, slaughtered the Samnites, unmanned the Umbrians, messed up the Messapians, and even grappled with Greeks. They only stopped fighting because they'd run out of land to conquer. Italy was now entirely under the control of the Roman Republic, yet a threat to Roman supremacy was growing right at their doorstep. Just off the toe of Italy sits the island of Sicily, and that island was being conquered by another ambitious city-state, with its own imperial designs. Just across the Mediterranean, on the shores of Africa, stood Carthage. Carthage is, in many ways, a mirror of Rome. Carthage was founded as a Phoenician colony around 800 BCE. Rome was founded fewer than 50 years later. As a result of this slight delay, the Carthaginians had a small head start on the Romans. And the fact that theirs was a naval empire, while Rome was a land empire, gave them a still greater advantage. But Carthage's greatest advantage was that it was a Phoenician colony trying to unify other Phoenician colonies, with whom they shared a common language and culture. By contrast, the Romans were invaders, forced to fight against dozens of independent peoples who all spoke different languages. Carthage's many advantages meant that Carthage was capital of a prosperous coastal empire that dominated the western Mediterranean. They controlled the northern coast of Africa, the southern coast of Spain, and most of the islands of the western Mediterranean, including half of Sicily. By contrast, Rome was the capital of a mere peninsula, albeit a densely populated one. Yet relative size was not the only difference between the Carthaginians and the Romans. Carthage was a city of traders. They were ruled by a council of merchant princes. They were highly civilized, literate, and scientifically advanced, though they also may have engaged in human sacrifice. What's important to know now is that the Carthaginians had built their empire through trade and wealth as much as through force. By contrast, Rome was a nation of soldiers and farmers. Their republic was run, in many respects, like an oversized military camp. Roman culture was relatively primitive compared to the advanced Carthaginians. They did not have Carthage's wealth or intercontinental trade routes at their disposal. But what the Romans lacked in money and refinement, they made up for in manpower, strict organization, and ferocity. Combining these attributes, the Romans had built their empire through conquest and bloodshed. In 264 BCE, the ambitious Roman Republic and the wealthy Carthaginian Empire collided on the island of Sicily in the First Punic War. This war was very similar to Athens' battle with Sparta in the Peloponnesian War, in that it pitted a powerful army against a large and maneuverable navy. It was a drawn-out, bloody affair, with the Carthaginians trying to keep the battle at sea and the Romans trying to force the battle to land. After 24 years of continuous warfare that exhausted both cities, Carthage was driven from Sicily and forced to pay Rome a huge war indemnity, or fine. Bankrupted by the war and the indemnity, and unable to pay its mercenaries, the Carthaginian Empire was thrown into a mercenary war. Rome took advantage of the chaos to add the islands of Corsica and Sardinia to its growing Mediterranean empire. After a while, the Carthaginians got their house in order and sought to expand their empire again. Frustrated at sea by growing Roman dominance, the Carthaginians instead started colonizing the Iberian Peninsula. The native Iberians weren't nearly so viciously organized as the Romans, and the Carthaginians spread easily. The Romans were once again nervous about the growing power of Carthage, or at least that's what the Roman historians say. Personally, I think that Rome was just looking for a new target for their annual warfare, since they'd just finished conquering Illyria across the Adriatic in 219 BCE. Whatever the reason, in 218 BCE, Rome declared war, and the Second Punic War began. The Roman navy had improved significantly since the beginning of the last Punic War, and they were confident they could hold off any Carthaginian invasion. Yet while the Romans had been beefing up their navy, the Carthaginians had been building up a huge army in Spain. Rome was so fixated on rebuffing the Carthaginian navy that it never occurred to them that someone might be crazy enough to march that big Spanish army over the Alps and invade Italy by land. Yet that is just what the Carthaginian general did. That general's name was Hannibal, and his military genius made him one of the most fearful figures in Roman history. When Hannibal's army, which included dozens of war elephants, descended from the Alps, he must have felt much like those first Latins had felt, looking down on the Italian peninsula 1,000 years earlier. Here was a lush land, just begging to be conquered. Indeed, had Hannibal not lost his siege engines during his passage through the Alps, he very well might have conquered all of Italy. Hannibal smashed every army the Romans put in front of him, but without siege equipment, he was unable to take Rome itself. Instead, Hannibal laid waste across the countryside and tried to entice other Italian cities to rebel. For some reason, not one Italian city took up arms against Rome. Perhaps it was loyalty, or perhaps these cities feared Rome more than they feared this invader. Whatever the reason, Hannibal's plan to turn Rome's subjects against it failed. Nevertheless, through his military genius, Hannibal ravaged Italy for 16 years. Now you may be wondering, how did Hannibal catch the mighty Romans with their pants down? Shouldn't they have been better prepared? After all, they were the ones who started the war. There are two reasons Rome fared so poorly. I've already mentioned the first problem. No one had expected Hannibal to take his army over the mountains. Rome had been expecting another naval war, like the First Punic War, so Roman troops were scattered across numerous islands. The second problem was that Rome had overextended itself. While Hannibal was ravaging his way across Italy, Philip V of Macedon had taken advantage of the chaos to expand his own kingdom. Philip's invasion of Greece and Illyria prevented the veteran armies Rome had deployed to the east from returning home to reinforce Italy. Unable to bring its full strength to bear against Hannibal, the Romans had to resort to delaying techniques. Once Philip had been dealt with, some of Rome's best armies were once again available for battle. Rather than running home to oust the invader, the Roman general Scipio brought the fight to Carthage. Scipio invaded Africa, earning him the name Scipio Africanus, and, more importantly, cutting off Hannibal's supply lines. Hannibal hurried home with his army and was soundly defeated at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. The following year, Carthage surrendered. The mighty Carthaginian Empire was reduced to little more than the city of Carthage itself, and Rome further burdened Carthage with an even larger war indemnity than for the First Punic War. Meanwhile, Carthage's holdings in Spain were added to the Roman Empire. Rome had also gained territory during their simultaneous war with Philip V of Macedon, and gained a foothold in Africa by establishing Numidia as a client state. Things were looking pretty good for Rome and pretty terrible for Carthage. In a single lifetime, little more than 60 years, Rome and Carthage had reversed positions. Rome was now the dominant force in the Western Mediterranean. It had added Carthage's European territory to the empire and extended its reach eastward. By contrast, Carthage was now the underdog, allowed only to live because the Romans could get more money out of Carthage through Carthage paying the indemnity than they could through just pillaging the city. 50 years later, Carthage had finally managed to pay off that huge indemnity, meaning that Rome no longer had any interest in keeping them alive. In an act of pure tyranny, Rome demanded that the Carthaginians abandon their city and resettle 10 miles inland. For a trading nation, this was a death sentence. Carthage naturally refused, and Rome descended upon its old nemesis with all its might, besieging the city for 2 years before it fell at last in 146 BCE. To review, from 264 to 146 BCE, the Romans fought a series of 3 wars with the rival state of Carthage. These wars are collectively called the Punic Wars. The First Punic War was over ownership of Sicily. It stretched for 24 years before the Romans were finally victorious. Rome gained the island of Sicily, and Carthage paid a huge fine. The Second Punic War was fought over a perceived threat to Roman power. Carthage had begun colonizing Spain, and Rome responded by declaring war. The Carthaginian general Hannibal marched his army from Spain to Italy, and laid waste to the Italian countryside for 16 years. Rome only won by bringing the war to Africa under the leadership of Scipio Africanus. Rome gained dominance over the Western Mediterranean, and Carthage lost almost all of its territory, and received another even larger fine. The Third Punic War brought an end to Carthage. After a 3-year siege, Rome burned Carthage to the ground.
All right. I hope you guys all have a good day, and just go ahead and submit that to Classroom, and you're good to go. Have a good one.